So Squad just had another Unreal Engine 5 playtest this past weekend, and I've got to say, what in the was that? Like, seriously, I don't even know what to think of all this. We had cool new content like the Canadian Resistance Forces, which have M1 carbines, Lee Enfield bolt action rifles, and giant backpacks full of tannerite explosives. We had a revised ICO with new changes to recoil and weapon sway, which made aiming way better. And then we also had things like whatever this is, and then this, and what is going on with my FPS? Now, I'm not going to lie, as much as I wanted to say I enjoyed the last playtest, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. These weren't just bugs, but there were some absolutely game-breaking bugs. In my last video on Squad's playtest, I said I could ignore minor things because I'm trying to focus on optimization, but there's a big difference between a playtest that has like a broken layer and a playtest that has your entire team not being able to use anti-tank weapons or even being able to save your own radio. There were very big problems here that affected the overall feelings of games, but on the other hand, I also had one of the best games I've actually ever played with a nearly 2-hour invasion game on Goose Bay. The constant flip-flop between absolute frustration and sheer enjoyment was crazy here, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the bad broken stuff and how it affected gameplay, my thoughts on new content like the commendation system and Canadian Resistance Forces. We're going to discuss the recoil, sway, and weapon handling changes, and then we're going to wrap the video up with some optimization talk. Like I said, there were some maps where I was at a stable 115 FPS, and others where I had massive hitching. So yeah, I was originally going to make this video just being a breakdown on the ICO changes, but that ain't happening. This test was all over the place and we need to talk about it. So let's first kick it off with the main bugs. There is something seriously wrong with picture-in-picture scopes this time around, and it's preventing users from seeing through anti-tank optics and I believe some sniper scopes. I never noticed any problem when it came to the regular rifle optics like a 1P78 or M158 cog, but the PGO for the RPGs and the Carl Gustavs were just completely unusable. And as you saw in the intro, at one time I even had the PGO's green scope overlay on my 1P78 while also having that black screen bug. Like, I don't even know how you confuse these two weapons and the overlays and how you break this. The main issue is that with all these problems, it inadvertently gave vehicles a huge advantage during the test. Multiple games I had something as simple as an open top Humvee or even just a tap V with a GPMG just kill squads worth of players over and over again and camp habs because nobody could kill it quick enough. Yeah, you could use a LAW or an AT4, but players who would normally one-shot these vehicles with hat rounds were essentially useless, and it got even worse when the actual IFVs or tanks would roll up. The worst part about this whole thing is that AT shouldering was supposed to be a big change for this playtest. Handheld AT weapons are now quicker to ADS, and the sway is not nearly as prominent when you do have lower stamina, so theoretically, this was supposed to be a huge buff to infantry AT, and you didn't need to just sit around and keep your weapon up way ahead of time in order to get a stable shot off. Now you could just be moving around like normal, spot a vehicle, crouch, and fire within a second without too much of an issue, but without the hat kits to really scare away Vics or your PGO scopes to take accurate long-range shots, it created games that just played very differently. If vehicle players knew that hats couldn't kill them, then they would be more aggressive, and I would argue that this lopsided vehicle gameplay means that this entire testing of the anti-tank changes needs to be scrapped and completely redone. Additionally, one of the worst bugs I've seen is what appears to be a foliage bug. Something about the bushes and the small trees in this build made it so that if radios were placed in them, a common thing to do to, camouflage and hide your radio, you couldn't actually dig the radio up to save it if it was being dug down. That meant the moment the radio took enough damage to be unspawnable, that entire fob was lost. This created a lot of disjointed attacks and prevented a lot of sustained firefights, which was kind of the whole reason of testing. That type of stuff is where you can really see if the ICO is working or not working. It was really frustrating, and as a sapper, I snuck up to one and tried placing my new bang bag tannerite explosive on it, but as you can see, the bag kind of just glitched placed above me, and then I wasn't able to detonate it by shooting it because I think my rifle rounds were hitting this invisible indestructible leaf thing. I don't even know what was going on, but the collision here meant everything was a problem when it came to radios, and it just was a consistent issue for the entire weekend. I'm not saying we didn't have good firefights or we couldn't test firefights because of all this, but what I am saying is that those moments were way fewer and less intense than they usually were because of all these lost fobs. I'm scratching my head on why all this stuff happened because it wasn't like this in past playtests. It just seems like the devs said, you know what, we have all this stuff, we're gonna just slap it together in a build, let's just see what works and what doesn't, and we can fix it later. And unfortunately that caused problems like what I've just said, but it also meant we got some weird exploits like this new performance mode. Yeah, picture-in-picture optics can be really tough on lower end systems, so this performance mode is supposed to black out everything not in your scope, and instead it blacked out the entire world and just gave us wall hacks. Like it just removed a whole bunch of textures and you can see enemies through walls and vehicles through walls. And like, really? The entire playtest wasn't just full of like the minor bugs we had in the past, but these bugs were major gameplay affecting bugs, which really interrupted my enjoyment of the game throughout the entire weekend. Now, I'm sure the devs are tracking all these bugs, but part of me feels like this should have really just spent another week to cook and remove the big exploit ones like this performance, fix this radio bug, all that type of stuff to get better testing, but it is what it is. It was annoying, and honestly, it did really affect the gameplay in a way that I do think it affected testing. It's unfortunate because major bugs aside, the actual content we got in game was fun, like really fun. First is the ground forces of Iran, and they really do play just like MEA. The camo is different, there are some different patches, and I do want to say they have different voice lines, like the start of the game or commander voices. I feel like those were different, but overall, if you liked MEA, you will like Iran. There are a few more weapon choices with AKs instead of just G3s. There's one of the domestically produced M16s. The Humvees were really cool to see, and they have given the Samir cars their real names, the Saphir, but overall it felt very similar, but with a few nice additions. And I did really appreciate the realistic faction name and imagery that came with it. Now, when it comes to the Canadian Resistance Forces, however, these guys, unrealistic as all hell, but super fun to play. I know these guys are a bit of a meme. They wear flannel, they use bolt-action rifles and backpacks stuffed with explosives that detonate when shot, but oh man, did I just really love playing them. This is one of those factions that I think is perfect for one type of game and one type of game only, and that game is Invasion, specifically them being the defenders on Invasion. I played these guys a few times during the playtest, but nothing really felt better than having them as defenders. Their kits aren't really the best. There's a lot of semi-auto civilian rifles with mixed matched optics. They do have a Coyote for an IFV, but with the buddy rallies and scout drones and all these different types of equipment, it really felt like we had a lot of options to just constantly harass the enemy. My favorite kit out of all of them is the new Sapper, and I tried a number of things with the Tannerite, or I guess it's technically called Bangerite in game, and it's a brand new, enormous placeable IED bag. Unlike Insurgent IEDs, you don't have a cell phone to call it in and detonate. It will only detonate on contact by either a bullet or a nearby explosive, and you get only one of these, meaning that every time you do try to place a new bang bag, it will just destroy the other one. Because of this, you do kind of have to babysit the bang bag. I linked up with another sapper and we ambushed American Squad. He placed his bang bag and I was supposed to detonate it from afar as he ran away, but either I'm a horrible shot or the collision for this bag is super tiny. He did eventually turn around and detonate it, which was awesome, but throughout the game, it felt like the method to just shoot the bag by yourself was actually very difficult. Instead, what I ended up doing is I would place these bags by a mine, and the explosion from the mine would cause a secondary larger explosion from the bang bag, absolutely obliterating vehicles. This worked perfectly, and on maps where there are a lot of roadside bushes, it will be absolutely devastating for vehicles. I also tried to do a type of IED bike, but with the bang bag on an APC, and it didn't work that well. One small AT round caused the entire thing to detonate it before I got there, so it's fun, but it's not completely OP. Definitely worthy of shenanigans though. So yeah, the combination of tools like the bang bag and all these weapons make for a very fun and mobile faction. It plays very differently, and I don't think I'd like to play them on AS or RAS, but they're perfect for invasion defenders. I do hope we get to see more factions like this that are unique to the map biome and have very different ways to play, because I just had an absolute blast with them on Goose Bay. It was different, it was weird, it was good to just have fun in squad, and these Canadians were fun. Now, the other bit of new content is the commendation system, and it was really nice. I don't know exactly what causes you to get a commendation token, whether it's just time in game or maybe certain squad points, but the notification would pop up periodically throughout the match, and at the end of the round you could right click and commend a player for player friendly traits like teamwork, leadership, or being a good teacher, or commend them for their current role. When you are commended, you'll get a notification, and if it ups your rank, your new rank is shown as well. You can see these ranks in the scoreboard, and if you do have things like teamwork, you can choose to show them off in the new career section in the main menu. The numbers next to the kit show what rank you are, and if you select one, you can see how many commends you need to rank up. It appears the first few levels are pretty easy to get, just only one commend will get you up a level, but as you get to rank 4 or 5, it starts to increase, so I'd assume it's going to be very difficult to get these higher ranks. I really liked this system and it was fun working towards recognition, but my main complaint is that this was restricted to whatever role you were playing at the end of the round. So if you are anti-tank for the entire round, but right before it ends, you swap to medic or rifleman or something because your squad needs it, you won't be able to get commends for the anti-tank. I do think it'd be nice if there was like some way to track this for players so you could give them a commend for their most played role during that specific game, but I don't know how difficult that would be to code in. I just know that I'm the type of player that in a game like Squad, I will constantly bounce around open kits to fit whatever the squad needs or the squad leader requests, so it would be nice if players like this get recognized as well. Oh, and one more thing, we need to have like a Logi or driver commend as well. Logistics players and drivers are some of the most least appreciated roles in Squad, and they definitely need to be thanked. Alright, so now for the ICO changes. I'm going to give you guys a few examples here between the current game and the playtest, but I also want to reiterate what the devs intended to do here. They had 3 goals: make recoil feel more natural, less random, and less intense without detracting from our intent to have extended firefights within gameplay, make engagements below 150 meters feel less frustrating, and mitigate the problem of losing the front sight post from the front of the weapon moving down during recoil. Overall, I think they achieved that. Recoil in general is way down, especially on really frustrating weapons like the MPTs and G3s, and when you paired it with this new sway, it didn't feel like pre-ICO to me, but it felt more in line with what the ICO had intended to accomplish. In Live Squad, this combination of recoil and sway is what makes the weapon feel uncontrollable at times, but this playtest has made it easier for players to keep the weapon pointed at their target. With the M4, we can see that at 75% stamina, both the playtest and the live versions are fairly similar, but you can see the real changes when we get to 50% stamina. The playtest is almost a full second quicker to take that first shot, and it's even more noticeable at 25% stamina, where I'm able to take 2 accurate shots before the first one is even fired on the live game. Without even shooting, you can see just how much sway is affecting your weapon when you don't have stamina, and this noodle arm feeling is what the playtest has been aiming to fix. Now your weapon is aimed to the center of your screen quicker and has less variance in the sway, making it less like you're rocking on a boat and more like you're on stable ground. If we zoom in to what happens when you ADS without stamina, we can see that your irons move everywhere in current Squad. It's really hard to stay on target, and this, paired with that heavy recoil, makes it very difficult to hit your target, no matter the weapon. In the playtest, this variance is nearly twice as small, keeping your irons pretty much center mass. This is pretty much across the board for any weapon, but the only ones I didn't really notice much of a change were those like DMRs and snipers. Here we can see the SVDM has almost no change from the live and playtest versions, but that's like okay. I mean, it's a DMR with a high-powered optic, and it's not intended for you to run and gun, so I still think this current sway is acceptable. The fact that your M4 is your 8Ks, these MPTs, the fact that those ones are more usable is way more important. Now, aside from semi-auto, if you do burst or try to use full auto, it still is obviously a lot harder to stay on target, but it is way more manageable than current Squad. Like, it feels like you can control your rifle again. It also looks like there's a lot less visual clutter on screen. It's easier to see when you shoot big bursts in your machine guns, but I still really dislike how your entire weapon platform just seems to tilt upwards and to the right during fully automatic firing, and it still feels very difficult to hit targets with MGs. Although I do think this is a good step in the right direction, these MGs have been a problem since the ICO was implemented. It pretty much killed the machine gunner role, and I still think they need a bit more love. If I'm laying down prone, I should be super stable here, and I'm not. But aside from the MGs, everything else feels really good. And I'll say this, there's a few people I know that haven't touched Squad in about a year, honestly maybe closer to a year and a half, 2 years, and they installed the game and enjoyed it. They actually had fun during the playtest. They're huge anti-ICO folks, and they were actually having fun. If the machine guns can be a bit more usable and aim punch suppression was lessened from things like pistols, like seriously, I'm rocking on a boat from a pistol here. What are you doing, Squad? Like, if they can fix that type of stuff, then I think both ICO enjoyers and ICO haters will really enjoy this new gameplay. Now, lastly, we need to chat about optimization because this was all over the place. Some maps had great frames, some other ones I didn't. I had hitching every now and then. It just seemed in general like a big downgrade from whatever the last playtest was. Sanshan was still a huge problem map for me, and I also found areas of Yeho that would dip me from 100 FPS all the way down to 60 or 50. Foliage is still a massive problem, so much so that after tweaking a bunch of settings, I actually managed to get a stable 115 FPS on everywhere in Narva, but the places where there was foliage. The only big spot where I noticed drop frames was in this tiny little forested spot between the apartments where I lost something like 40 FPS for the entire time I was in it. It's so weird though. I'd be wandering around Narva, going inside buildings, attacking objectives, doing everything with a lot of stuff happening, explosions and vehicles and effects, and I would be consistently 115, 120 FPS, but the moment I would get into an open foliage area, it would just tank. I'm not sure what needs to change, but we either need the devs to fix foliage performance or maybe even just give us sliders to adjust things on a map-by-map basis and save them to our config files. I would unfortunately spend a couple of minutes every single round tweaking my settings for that specific map, and that was just so freaking annoying. A preset, although I don't think is a good solution, is a much better solution if this stuff really can't be fixed. I'm fine playing on worse settings or lower FPS depending on the map. I just don't want to have to adjust my settings every damn time I load the game. But yeah, as a whole, I think the playtest was, well, I had a lot of fun with the new content. The commendation system was really fun. The weapon handling is incredible, minus a few complaints I had about MGs and aim punch, and it still resulted in good games. Yes, there are game-breaking bugs that honestly took away from the entire playtest, in my own opinion, and I think we weren't able to really test out these large team-on-team firefights to really test the ICO, but I got a good taste, and I think it's in the right direction. Honestly, though, I think this playtest shows that the devs have a lot to do before this is release ready, and I'm hoping they're able to fix these bugs while still continuing to improve UE5 performance. This might be critical here, but whatever was in the last playtest build, the one before this one, was in a far better state than whatever we played here. Like, it feels like we're going backwards. I don't know if there's some behind the scenes stuff on why this build is so different from the last one, but the performance was rough, the bugs were crazy, and yeah, I felt good, but at the same time, why? Why was it so broken? But what do you guys think? Did you like the playtest? Does the new weapon handling feel good to you? Are you enjoying these weird offshoot factions like the Canadian Resistance Forces? And also, how was your performance? Better? Worse? Let me know down in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and hopefully we'll get a little bit less buggy playtest the next time around. But that's it for me. Until next time, peace.